I hate to interrupt the member from Kelowna Lake Country in the middle of her speech. She has 2 minutes and 6 seconds left on her discussion on this piece of legislation. But it being 4 o'clock, pursuant to order made Thursday, November 9, 2023, I now invite the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance to make a statement. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honour to table, in both official languages, the 2023 Fall Economic Statement.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Mr. Speaker, our government was elected on a promise to deliver for the middle class. And our economic plan is focused on building an economy that works for everyone, with good jobs that people can count on.
Major investments in public transit, in EV battery factories, and in new energy projects are not just red ink in our fiscal statement. They are truly investments, decade-long investments in the economic growth, which creates middle-class jobs, which raises incomes and makes middle-class communities more prosperous.
Continental Railway a century ago. These are foundational investments which only government can make. We believe in Canada, and we believe in the incredible possibility of Canada's future. And that is why we are making the investments that Canada needs to make that bright future a reality.
Bravo.
Affordable early learning and childcare is likewise an investment in our social infrastructure, and it is also transformative economic policy. It gives children the best possible start in life and saves middle-class families thousands of dollars a year, while also supporting record women's employment and thus helping to address the labor shortages which contributed to inflation. When I announced our plan to build a Canada-wide system of affordable early learning and childcare, some people were skeptical, and justifiably so. After all, it was a promise that had been made and broken for 5 decades. But today, just 2.5 years after we launched our plan, it is working. Childcare fees are down by at least 50% across Canada. In 6 provinces and territories, we've already brought childcare costs down to just $10 a day. And we are on track to deliver outstanding, nurturing care for $10 a day everywhere in Canada by 2026.
And it is women in Quebec who led the way in terms of affordable childcare. Therefore, our plan supports the creation of 30,000 new spots to make childcare services more accessible across the province.
to Canada's social safety net, ranging from the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, the Canada Pension Plan, are about driving down inequality, raising incomes, and ensuring by design, not by trickle down, that everyone can truly share in our country's prosperity. With investments in our economy, our communities, and a new generation of middle-class careers, we have focused relentlessly on ensuring that government investments deliver real economic opportunities for all Canadians. And that, Mr. Speaker, is our economic plan. Pensons seulement à tout le chemin.
Just think of how far we've come, Mr. Speaker. Right after a decade of conservative austerity, our government has lifted nearly 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty. Inflation is coming down, and wages are going up. And private sector economists now expect Canada to avoid the post-pandemic recession that many had predicted.
To our economic plan, Canada is today a global investment destination of choice. In the In the first half of this year, Canada received the third most foreign direct investment of any country in the entire world.
Bravo! Bravo!
And that was more investment per capita than any of our G7 allies. More investment than the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, France, or Japan.
Wow.
And the IMF projects Canada to likewise see the strongest economic growth in the G7 next year.
Wow.
What does all of this mean for people, Mr. Speaker? What this means is that our economy is creating great jobs for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And compared to before the pandemic, I am so glad to be able to say that over 1 million more Canadians are employed today. We all have more work to do, Mr. Speaker, but our economic plan is working. Ceci étant dit,
Now, I don't want to deny the difficult reality that many Canadians are facing today. I absolutely understand that after 3 difficult years, after a global pandemic, global inflation, and global interest rate hikes, Canadians are worn out, frustrated, and feeling the squeeze. What Canadians deserve today is for us to address the very real pain that so many are feeling. With a hopeful and achievable vision for our country's future. That is my priority. That is our government's priority. And that is the priority of this fall economic statement.
the foundation of our fall economic statement is our responsible fiscal plan. In the face of global inflation, our government has reduced the deficit faster than any other country in the G7. And, with inflation down from 8.1% last year to just 3.1%
Wow, that's
today.
something. That's something.
We are taking care not to feed inflation by carefully targeting new investments towards the priorities of Canadians today and towards the future growth that makes our finances sustainable. Canada maintains both the lowest deficit and the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the G7. And with a new reduction in public service spending, this fall economic statement builds on the $15 billion in refocus spending that I announced in the spring. We are ensuring that Canada's finances remain sustainable, because that's how we'll be able to continue investing in Canadians for years to come. Fondé sur notre...
Built upon our responsible fiscal plan, our fall economic statement has two objectives. The first is to continue supporting the middle class at a time when some prices are still high, and for many, mortgage renewals are looming. This is why we are making sizable changes, generational changes to competition law in Canada. This historic step includes cracking down on predatory pricing and other tactics that big corporations use to raise costs for Canadians. Talking about competition law may sound esoteric, but it's not. This is new, significant, concrete action that will help to stabilize prices and provide more choices for Canadians. We are cracking down on the junk fees that Canadians are saddled with every day. Every day. And an investigation will soon be launched into international roaming charges that drive up Canadians' phone bills. We are lifting the GST and HST on counseling and psychotherapy services so that Canadians can receive the support they need. We are extending employment insurance to parents who adopt. And we are introducing a new leave for federally regulated workers who are grieving from miscarriages. Because family, every family, no matter how it comes together, needs time to bond. And every woman should have time to heal from the painful loss of a pregnancy.
Canadians who are struggling with their mortgage payments at a time of higher interest rates. Today, I am announcing the new Canadian Mortgage Charter. The Canadian Mortgage Charter details the tailored mortgage relief that Canadians need and can expect from their banks if they are in financial difficulty. Our goal is to help Canadians through an incredibly challenging time by making sure Canadians have the support they need to afford their mortgages and keep their homes when renewing at a time of higher interest rates. And we're committed to taking further action if necessary. Our second objective is equally urgent. For generations, Canada has been a country where if you worked hard, if you went to school, found a good job, and squirreled some money away, there would be a home that you could afford. For generations, that promise was kept. But today, for a generation that ranges from new high school graduates to couples in their 30s making six-figure salaries, that is a promise which is under threat. Keeping that promise demands a great national effort, and that is an effort that our government is stepping up to lead. Building on the significant action we have already taken, including this fall alone, I am today announcing new measures through our economic plan to build thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new homes across the country and to build them faster. We are unlocking billions of dollars in new financing, money that will go towards supporting the construction of new homes for Canadians. We are supporting nonprofit, co-op, and public housing providers. We will be helping to cut the red tape that prevents construction workers from moving across the country to build homes, and we will be bringing more of the skilled trades workers that our construction sector needs to Canada. We'll be cracking down on short-term rentals listed on sites like Airbnb and Vrbo, which are keeping far too many homes off the market in communities and cities right across the country. That's going to make a real difference to communities. And Mr. Speaker, that is just what we are doing today. We are also making it easier for more than 250,000 Canadians and counting to buy their first home with the new tax-free First Home Savings Account. The federal government owns more land than anyone else in Canada, and we're going to build more homes on it. We're lifting the GST on new rental construction to make it more affordable for builders to build so that they can build more homes faster. We're repairing and building hundreds of thousands of new homes, and we are financing the construction of tens of thousands more. We have banned foreign investment in Canadian housing, and we're ensuring that property flippers pay their fair share. We're making it more affordable for families to construct secondary suites. And we have signed agreements with cities across the country to slash the red tape, which is preventing homes from being built in the first place. And in exchange, we're providing them with new funding to build more than 100,000 new homes faster. Because our country needs more homes, and we need more of them fast. Nous devons construire.
We must build homes in our biggest cities and our smallest towns. We must build detached family homes and secondary suites. We must build co-op housing and rental apartments. And it will take all of us, the federal government and the provinces, cities and towns, the private sector and not-for-profits, right across this great country. That's what our government is doing, and we are approaching this task with the purpose, drive, and intensity it deserves. We will keep working day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year to build the homes that Canadians need and expect and deserve. At the heart of the promise of Canada is the conviction that Every day should represent a new opportunity for all Canadians. No matter who you are, no matter what you look like, or who you love, or where you were born. Also, if you work hard, you can share in the remarkable possibilities of our wonderful country. This includes a good career that pays you well and a home you can afford.
Building a Canada that delivers on the promise of the greatest country in the world. That work will be our government's work for these next 2 years and beyond. Canada is not and never has been broken.
Indeed.
We are the imperfect and remarkable creation of generations of Canadians who did their part to build a better country in good times and in tough times, calloused hand by calloused hand. Generations of Canadians who fought fear and cynicism with hope and hard work. Generations of Canadians who fought day after day to keep Canada moving forward. And generations of Canadians who believed, just as I do today, that in our magnificent country, better is always possible.
Bravo. Well done.
Question, come on.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
With this $20 billion of costly new spending, this update can be summed up very simply. Prices up, rent up, debt up, taxes up, time's up. Common sense Conservatives will vote non-confidence on this disgusting scam.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, he is not worth the cost, and today he's adding another $20 billion to inflation, which will put pressure on interest rates. In addition, today he proposes to increase taxes on the backs of middle-class people. So that is why the Conservatives, guided by common sense, will vote against and non-confidence in this government.
You know, a year ago, this finance minister told the House she'd have the budget balanced by the year 2028. In that time, she has announced $100 billion of additional debt above and beyond having doubled that debt in the first place. This debt is already being paid by Canadians with the worst inflation in 40 years, with interest rates that risk a mortgage meltdown on the $900 billion of mortgages that will renew over the next 3 years. That's 2/3 of mortgages, with the IMF saying that of all 40 OECD countries, Canada is the most at risk of a mortgage crisis. And now, her solution, another $20 billion of inflationary spending. This after the Governor of the Bank of Canada has said the deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to mortgage rates on the backs of Canadians. And finally, Today, they go ahead with a plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple.
Point of order. For the member from Elmo Transcona, if you can just give me a minute, if I could just consult with the table for an instant. The honourable member from Elmo Transcona on a point of order.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I may have been under a mistaken impression. I thought we were in the question and comment period, but perhaps we're into speeches. I just wonder if you could provide some guidance to the Leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you.
I thank the honourable. I do thank the honourable member from Elmo Transcona. We are in a period of question and comments. There are 10 minutes for questions and comments. I am hoping that the honourable Leader of the Opposition will come to his question so that we'll have an equal amount of time for the Minister of Finance to respond, and as well as I know that there are other finance critics from each of the parties who would also like to ask questions and comments. The honourable Leader of the Opposition, I hope, can come soon to his question.
We can always count on the NDP to betray their constituents and come to the rescue of the taxing standard. And so my question, not just on behalf of the common sense Conservatives, but on behalf of the countless people who are losing their homes, who are lined up at food banks, who are living through the worst economy since the Great Depression, is exactly how much will it cost the average family when this government goes ahead with its plan to quadruple the carbon tax? How much?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let's start by setting the record straight. Canada has the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7, and we've had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation. And you don't need to ask me, Mr. Speaker, about our fiscally responsible track record. Talk to the ratings agencies, because they have reaffirmed our AAA rating. But, Mr. Speaker, the question that we all need to be asking the Conservatives is, why are they so passionately opposed to the investments that Canadians need? Why are they opposed to early learning and childcare, which is working, which is making life more affordable for Canadians and is expanding our labor force at a time when we desperately need it? Why are they so opposed to building more homes faster for Canadians? Why have they said it is, quote unquote, disgusting to be investing in building more rental homes? Is it disgusting for us to be cracking down on Airbnb? And why are they so opposed to our essential investments in the industrial transformation that Canada needs?
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Among the measures called for by the Bloc Québécois that the Bloc wanted to see in this fall economic statement, there was one element that it was urgency. We called for monies for seniors who are suffering because of the rise in the cost of living. We asked for a one-year reprieve for the small businesses that are asking for an extra year to repay. And we asked for money for businesses and seniors, but also for people who are homeless. We asked for an emergency fund for people who are about to spend the winter on the street. So my question for the Minister of Finance is, what is her definition of the word urgent? Because it's not the same as ours. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you what I find urgent. I find building housing in Quebec and all over Canada to be urgent. And that is why in this fall economic statement, we are investing $16 billion in building housing. That is urgent, and that is why we are doing it now. We also find it urgent, Mr. Speaker, to have an economic plan for jobs today and tomorrow. And that is why we are investing in the green transition. We've made the biggest investment in Quebec's history, and I know that now Premier Legault was very proud to be a partner with us. We are investing for the needs of today and the jobs of today and tomorrow.
The honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the minister mentioned in her remarks that we're facing a housing crisis, certainly a significant housing shortage. She talked about how Canada has the lowest debt in the G7. She talked about how it has the lowest deficit in the G7. The government of the Bank of Canada said that spending on housing wouldn't be inflationary. Now, she announced some measures today for social housing, but they don't start until 2025, 2026.
Triggered the Conservative.
The honourable member rising on a point of order.
My point of order, Mr. Speaker, is that there isn't a question in this long, rambling, pointless speech.
Order. I'd like to remind all members that this is a question and comments. The honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona still has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am tempted to start from the top, but I won't, because I do want to get to the point, which is that for a government that's saying they're in a good fiscal position, and with a Bank of Canada that says spending on housing is not inflationary, the question is, why are the new investments for social housing put off to 2025?
Good question. Yeah, that's a good question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister for Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the member for Elmwood-Transcona for his commitment to Canadians, for his hard work on housing. Mr. Speaker, we absolutely understand the urgency of investing in housing. We need to invest in housing today, and we need to have a plan to continue investing in housing going forward. I am very pleased that our investments in housing right now include supporting the development of co-op housing, of lifting the GST from new co-op developments, along with providing new funding to get them built. As someone who has lived in a co-op, I can tell you, this is one of the best forms of affordable housing that creates great community at the same time.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre on a brief question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that the finance minister recognizes we are in a climate crisis. At the same time, she needs to know that oil and gas companies are gouging Canadians at the pumps. 47 cents of every dollar of inflation is from corporate profits. Why would they not apply the Canada Recovery Dividend, which they already did, to banks and life insurance, to big oil in the fall economic statement?
And a brief answer from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
We absolutely understand the urgency of climate action. That is why I'm delighted that today we are publishing a timeline for our investment tax credits that are so essential to Canada's green transition and to our economic plan that is creating jobs today and jobs tomorrow.
Yeah. Brief question from the member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in the past number of budgets, we have seen the federal government commit significant funding to support the people of Ukraine in their fight against Russia's genocidal invasion. And so my question to the Minister of Finance is, we just saw the Conservative Party MPs vote against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, basically voting against support for Ukraine. Could the Minister clarify what is this government's position on support for Ukraine?
Excellent question. And a very brief answer from the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition described our measures to build new homes for Canadians as disgusting. I'll tell you what I will describe as disgusting. The failure by the official opposition to support the country which is fighting the world's fight right now for democracy, for the rules. I am appalled.
Please today.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, inflation has reached its highest level in 40 years. Work no longer pays. The cost of housing has doubled. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder are common on our streets, and the Prime Minister just divides Canadians to distract from all of his failures. We must recognize the country that the Prime Minister found when he came into office. Let's begin with interest rates and inflation. Those rates were low. Taxes were going down faster than at any point in our country's history. The budget was balanced. Crime had gone down by 25%, so much so that people in small towns often left their door unlocked. Our borders were secure. Housing cost half of what it costs today. Net wages had gone up by 10%. That's after inflation and after taxes. The New York Times said that the Canadian middle class was richer. The New York Times said that the Canadian middle class was richer than the American middle class for the first time. All of that despite an unprecedented financial crisis in the United States and a war in Syria, in Iraq, and yes, in Ukraine. It's amusing to note that in Stephen Harper's day, those wars did not cause inflation in Canada. But when this current Prime Minister took power, prices went up exorbitantly. 8 years later, look at where we are. Inflation, after having already reached 40-year highs, is once again too high. The economy is contracting. The economy is not growing, even though the population is growing. GDP per capita today is lower than it was 6 years ago. It's the first time in our history that we've seen the economy and GDP per capita go down over 6 years. Canada's growth is the lowest in the OECD. Not only for the next 6 years, but for the next 3 decades. That's according to the OECD. That's not me. The cost of housing has more than doubled after 8 years of this government. After he promised to bring it down, it takes 25 years to save up enough money for a down payment in Toronto. Before this Prime Minister, it took 25 years to pay off a whole mortgage. Some families have to increase their mortgage to 80 years. That means that it could take 120 years to be able to not be in debt as a family. In reality, it will be children and grandchildren who will have to pay off mortgages from their parents and grandparents. We've never seen that in Canada. And I imagine there's nowhere in the world where that is the case.
Canadian homes now cost more than 50% more in Canada than in the United States. That's the reality after 8 years under this Prime Minister, who promised to make life more affordable. And what are his solutions today? First of all, he wants to increase taxes on gas, which increases the cost of everything. Everything that needs transportation will cost more with the carbon tax, which the government has just confirmed, which will increase the price of gas by 17 cents and 20 cents if we add to that the sales tax on it, a tax that the Bloc wants to increase on the backs of Quebecers. We're hearing promises for billions of dollars for housing, the same promises that we've heard for the past 8 years. For 8 years, we've heard about these expenditures, but it's only increasing bureaucracy and not housing. Another $20 billion in new spending, which will add to inflation and increasing interest rates. The Scotiabank has already said that 2% more percentage points of the interest rate are due to mortgages. And now, talking about the debt, next year, for the first time, we will spend more on debt interest than on health care. $50 trillion, $50 billion on debt. Then we send to the provinces for doctors and nurses. So bankers, investors in Manhattan will get the money, and our teachers, our nurses, our doctors won't get it. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker. Fortunately, our plan is based on common sense. It will eliminate waste to reduce inflation and interest rates. We will eliminate taxes to increase the cost of living for every Canadian. We will reduce taxes so that people work and get a paycheck. We will rebuild the Canadian dream where work allows anyone, no matter where they are, to earn a good living, to have a house, and to live peacefully in their communities. So the choice at the next elections will be between a costly coalition, which will take money away from you, increase your taxes, increase income taxes, and allow more crime, or people can be guided by good sense, common sense, which will allow them to earn more money to buy food, gas, and buy a house in the communities in which they live, which are safe. That's the choice, and we will be the only choice that makes sense for Quebecers and all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, as we stand here today and witness the misery that is visible across this country, it's hard to forget how good things were only 8 years ago when this Prime Minister took office. Let me review the hard facts. Never before has a Prime Minister inherited a richer legacy. Inflation and interest rates were rock bottom. Taxes were falling faster than at any time in Canadian history. The budget was balanced. It took 25 years to pay off a mortgage, not just to get a mortgage. Crime had fallen by 25%, so low that many small-town folks actually left their doors unlocked. Remember those good days when you could leave your door unlocked? No one would do that today. Our borders were secure. Housing costs half what it does today. Take-home pay had gone up 10% after tax and inflation. The New York Times had calculated that Canada's middle class was, for the first time ever, richer than America's middle class. All this despite a once-in-a-lifetime financial crisis in the U.S. and wars in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and yes, Ukraine. Funny how those wars didn't cause inflation when Prime Minister Harper was leading our economy. But yes, it's true that when this Prime Minister took office, Canada was rich, affordable, and safe. 8 years ago, yes, it was. Rich, affordable, and safe. And it's true. The very wealthy had not done particularly well. In fact, their share of the economy had shrunk during the Harper years. Now, the wealth concentrates among the very, very rich. And that is because inflationary policies always help the richest people. When government concentrates wealth in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats, they give it to the most politically influential people, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And now we're seeing the biggest gap ever between rich and poor. And a middle class, he promised to help the middle class, he has demolished the middle class, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. Inflation, after hitting 40-year highs, is back on the move. The economy is now shrinking, and if you add in per capita terms, it is plummeting, Mr. Speaker. In fact, GDP per person is actually smaller than it was 6 years ago. This has never happened, Mr. Speaker. Canada's growth is now projected to be the worst in the OECD between now and 2030, and the worst for the next 4 decades, according to the OECD. That's out of 40 countries. It now takes 25 years to save up for a down payment in Toronto. You used to pay off a mortgage in that time. Since this Prime Minister has taken office, families have stretched out the terms of their mortgages to 90 years. Today, the minister bragged that she's going to create this charter, which will, people are supposed to be grateful about this, will allow them to stretch out their mortgages longer so that you can now have a 100-year mortgage. Wow, and now we're supposed to thank them. Wow, what a wonderful news. I imagine she'll send it out in the mail so people can open their mailbox and find out that their great-great-grandchildren will still be paying off the mortgage on their home. Canadian homes now cost 50% more than in the United States of America. In fact, you can now buy a 20-bedroom castle in Scotland for a lower price than a 2-bedroom in Kitchener. Vancouver is now the third most unaffordable housing market in the world when you compare median income to median house prices, worse than New York City, than Los Angeles, Chicago, London, England, even Singapore, a tiny island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canada, has more affordable housing. And Toronto is rated by UBS to be the worst housing bubble in the world. If we had even imagined to say such a thing out loud 8 years ago, people would have laughed. But today, it is the reality, and they're not laughing. They're actually crying. In fact, the government promises all of a sudden, after 8 years, we should believe in their multi-billion-dollar promises to build homes. They built fewer homes last year than were built in 1972, 50 years ago. And that was at a time when our population was half of what it is today. So we're building fewer homes now that we have 40 million people than we built when we had 22 million people, Mr. Speaker. And no wonder we have this new phenomenon of middle-class, working, homeless people. We've never seen this before, but now we have nurses, electricians, carpenters living in parking lots, something they couldn't even imagine in Halifax, in your province, Speaker. The province, ironically, of the housing minister. There are 30 homeless encampments in one city. This would have been unimaginable. And now they expect us to believe that this time they mean it, that their billions of dollars of new spending are going to change what the billions of dollars they've spent over the last decade have caused. And that is the worst housing crisis in Canadian history, perhaps the worst in the world today. This Prime Minister has doubled our national debt, adding more debt than all of the previous 22 Prime Ministers combined. He continually tells us that there are no consequences for that debt. Well, the consequences are now becoming clear. Next year, the government will spend more on debt interest than it does on health care. So instead of the money going to doctors and nurses, it will go to bankers and bondholders in Manhattan and in London, England. Another transfer of wealth from the working class to everybody else, to the wealthiest people, from the working class to the smirking class, Mr. Speaker. We see the social breakdown that this has brought in our communities, with crime raging out of control. Shootings are up 101% across Canada over the last 8 years. Drug overdoses, 30,000 of them, Mr. Speaker. Social breakdown is the obvious consequence of the economic breakdown that the Prime Minister has caused. And on what has he spent all of this money? $54 million for the ArriveCan app that we didn't need, didn't work, and could have been done in a weekend by a couple of IT workers. We know that because they did. A couple of IT workers, as a lark, bought a few boxes of pizza and a case of beer and redesigned the entire ArriveCan app in a weekend. And it didn't cost them $54 million. Maybe we should send that app to the Prime Minister and call it the ResignCan app, Mr. Speaker. And then they blew $1 billion on a so-called green fund. The top bureaucrats say that who are involved in it say that it's a money-for-nothing scheme with gross incompetence that reminds them of the sponsorship scandal. The chair of the fund gave $200,000 of the money to her own company. Now, we find out that the $15 billion they're giving to a single battery plant is going to pay for 1,600 foreign workers. 1,600 foreign workers, Mr. Speaker. And they don't even have a place to live. There's a housing shortage in Windsor. Now, the Prime Minister's solution is to spend precious tax dollars on paychecks for people on the other side of the world to come here temporarily, collect the money, and take it back to South Korea. We all love South Korea, great country. But there's no reason why Canadian taxpayers should be subsidizing their paychecks. Yeah. Canadian tax dollars should exclusively go to Canadian paychecks. Yeah. That's common sense. And the Prime Minister, of course, wastes money through missed opportunities. We could develop our resources. For example, we could be breaking dependence on the world's dictators. And let's talk about this for a moment. Today, his party shamefully voted to impose a carbon tax on the people of Ukraine. They have voted to amend the existing Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, which Conservatives negotiated and which has been a success, to require that both countries have and promote carbon taxes, Mr. Speaker. Exactly the opposite of what the people of Ukraine need. They don't need a carbon tax when they're trying to fight and defeat a war. They need the ability to rebuild their economy, which takes energy. And that's why Conservatives will oppose any imposition of a carbon tax there or here or anywhere around the world. And you know what else they did? They voted against an amendment that would allow Canadians to build the arms that would allow Ukraine to win that war. We proposed an amendment to this update of the agreement that would have allowed Ukrainians to benefit from our incredible Canadian workers who produce munitions and equipment, and they voted no. So let's get this straight. They believe that the best way to counter Putin is with a carbon tax. We believe the best way to do it is by breaking European dependence on his energy sector and by providing and selling great Canadian arms to win the war. That's common sense. Canadians understand that the way that you help a country rebuild is by selling technology for energy. We proposed as well that we would provide both civilian nuclear technology and sell our civilian-grade uranium from Saskatchewan to power nuclear plants that would give emissions-free electricity to Ukrainians as they have to replace bombed-out electricity plants. The Prime Minister did not include that in his deal because he doesn't want affordable energy. He doesn't want the jobs to come back to our resource sector. All he wanted was to try and save his carbon tax. That's just how desperate he is, and in fact, how sick he is on this matter, Mr. Speaker. We all know that he was desperate to save his carbon tax, but for him to use the people of Ukraine, as a pawn in his scheme to save the carbon tax is a level of cynicism that we didn't even expect from that Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. When I'm Prime Minister, we will have a free trade agreement with Ukraine, and that agreement will not include a carbon tax. It will include the ability of us to provide clean Canadian nuclear and natural gas to have a strong energy superpower status for Canada and a secure Ukraine for the future. Absolutely. And the hypocritical members over there who pretend they support Ukraine, but then they supported the Prime Minister signing off on a turbine to go from Montreal to Putin so that he could power his natural gas pipeline and pump that gas into Europe to fund his war. That's the Prime Minister's priority, to give Putin more money selling natural gas. Our priority, our common sense plan, turns dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people in this country. I don't think this debate is going how they expected it to go. Their heads are all looking down, and rightfully so, Mr. Speaker. It will be a good moment for them to atone for the cynical approach they've taken on this and everything else, and frankly, the misery that they have unleashed in this country. This is the worst time in Canada's history for the Canadian people, particularly for the middle class. But the good news is we have a common sense plan that will axe the tax to bring home lower prices, cap spending and cut waste to bring down inflation and interest rates, remove bureaucracy to build more homes so that once again people can afford to rent and pay their mortgages. This will be a country that works for the people who do the work, the common people, the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it on.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Russia. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our government's fall economic statement announces new measures in order to get more homes built faster. The leader of the Conservative Party has called that, and I quote, a disgusting scheme. Shameful. Mr. Speaker.
It's terrible.
Why does the leader of the Conservative Party think that investments in the construction of 30,000 new rental apartments is disgusting? Why does the leader of the Conservative Party think that new federal investments for the construction of 7,000 new affordable homes is disgusting? Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Conservative Party owes us and Canadians an explanation.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, those houses cannot be characterized with any adjective other than non-existent. They don't exist. They stand up day after day and list off the thousands of houses that they have not built. Yeah. They've had 8 years. It would be one thing if they were still promising to build homes in their first year, maybe their second year. Okay, we'll give them 3 years. It has been 8 years. And the only thing they've accomplished on housing since promising to make it affordable is doubling the cost. They have doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, doubled the needed down payment for a home, and now we have $900 billion of mortgages that are coming up for renewal. That's 2/3 of all mortgages. And the IMF says we are the #1 at risk of having a mortgage crisis. It is disgusting to think of the families who did everything right, who risked losing everything because of the irresponsible policies of this Prime Minister and his NDP government.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, We often hear the Conservatives squabbling with the Liberals, but they're the same. In the economic update, the Liberals don't talk about homelessness, them either. They don't talk about small businesses and extending CEBA loans by a year. They won't talk about that either. They're doing nothing, the Liberals. And what are the Conservatives doing? Nothing. $92 billion to oil companies in assistance. Will they speak out against that? No, they're the oil lobby, Mr. Speaker. Housing, they won't even talk about it, the Liberals. What are they going to do? They're deciding to accuse municipalities, saying they don't build enough housing, Mr. Speaker. It's a party of slogans. It's a half dozen of one and six of more.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition a 1 minute.
The member is so angry. Very angry. Well, it's strange that he's so upset because his leader has just said that he will support the Liberals and keep them in power. I thought he would rise to celebrate all the wonderful things that the Liberals are doing by increasing inflation and driving up interest rates and the carbon tax that the Liberals want to drive up. Their leader also agrees that he wants to increase it as well. So the Bloc agrees with the Liberals on everything, except in terms of the capital of the country. That's it. That's the only point they disagree on with the Liberals. Fortunately, Quebecers will be able to vote for a logical party that will cut prices and give them bigger paychecks. That's what makes good sense.
The honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada's not going to get out of the housing crisis that we're in without significant investments in social and affordable housing. And the Liberals simply have not been building enough of that. We saw today that even the recapitalization of a program to build affordable housing is being put up to 2025. But you never hear the leader of the Conservative Party talk about building new affordable and social housing. And in fact, Canada is still losing way more affordable units than we're building because when he was housing minister, that government decided to cancel the operating agreements that made rents affordable in co-op and other forms of nonprofit housing across the country. So I wonder, will he finally start talking about the need to build more social and affordable housing in Canada to help address the crisis?
The honourable leader of the opposition has just over 1 minute.
Talking about almost nothing but making housing affordable for the last 3 years. When the NDP and the Liberals and the entire establishment were dismissing me, I told the country that we were headed for a housing crisis. And now everybody's playing catch up. But here's the problem for the NDP. The facts. When I was housing minister, you could rent the average one bedroom was $950. Now, under this NDP Liberal government, it's almost $2,000. When I was housing minister, you bought the average home with the average mortgage, it was $1,400 a month. Now it's $3,500 a month under the NDP and Liberals. When I was housing minister, the needed down payment for the average new home was $20,000. Now it's well over $50,000. The NDP has been in government now at least 2 years and supported the Prime Minister for long before that. Since they signed the coalition agreement, rent inflation has been its worst in Canadian history. We don't need more bureaucracy. We need my common sense plan to clear away the red tape and the gatekeepers, to build millions of new homes that Canadians can afford and allow them powerful paychecks to pay for it.
Yeah. The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition tried to excuse himself and his caucus out of the way that they voted earlier today with respect to the Ukraine free trade agreement. I want to tell him that nobody believes him. Mr. Speaker, President Zelensky asked us to vote in favor of this. The Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Congress asked us to vote in favor of this. As a matter of fact, the international trade lawyer for Larry Herman said the Conservative concern about reference to a carbon pricing makes them look petty and hyper-partisan. It's nothing more than a red herring, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that MAGA Republican politics now lives and resides within the Conservative Party of Canada.
Sad, but true.
Colleagues. Wow. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the hyperventilating member for Kingston only proves my point with those falsehoods. The Conservative Party initiated the original free trade agreement with Ukraine. We backed Ukraine against Crimea. We led the charge to kick Russia out of the G8, and now that's why we have the G7. This Prime Minister has betrayed Ukraine. He signed off on an export permit for a turbine to go to Russia so that Putin could pump gas and raise money to fund his war. He refused to sell natural gas from Canada, forcing Europeans to continue to fund that war. We want to defund Putin, Mr. Speaker. He embarrassed the president of Ukraine by allowing for a Nazi to be recognized on the floor of the House of Commons during the president's visit. And now the Prime Minister betrays Ukraine while the country has a knife at its throat. He uses it as an occasion to try and bolster his carbon tax by putting in it for the first time in the history of trade a carbon tax in a trade agreement. Mr. Speaker, Ukrainians don't need a carbon tax. Canadians don't need a carbon tax. And that's why my common sense plan will stand up to dictators like Putin, turn dollars to paychecks, dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people, and axe the tax for all.
I see that there are two members that would like to ask questions. We don't have a lot of time, so quick questions, please. And I hope the answers will be just as short. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And I would really like to ask the question to the Leader of the Conservative Party. It's a question that is really important. We are facing a government that has forgotten what is common sense for all Canadians. The Conservative Leader, can he tell us what is common sense and how a common sense government will help Canadian families? Unfortunately, I would just like to tell the Leader of the Official Opposition that he has 15 seconds. Common sense means getting rid of the carbon tax to reduce the cost of living for Canadians. Common sense means putting a cap on expenses and cutting waste to get the budget down and get inflation down. Common sense means cutting taxes so that it pays to work. That is what common sense is. Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to note that, as we know, this is a fall economic update. It's not a budget. We know that the budget sets out the government's priorities. It presents legislative measures to implement it. An economic update or a statement is more modest. It's supposed to present the evolution of the economic situation and the budget. What we're saying here in terms of the deficit, things can change based on forecasts, unlike what the PBO had calculated. This can be worrisome. It presents the government's response to these changes, but there's not much here. For example, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the summer, the government and the Prime Minister asked its new minister, who is president of the Treasury Board, for $50 billion in cuts to departments so that they could balance the books. This was presented in October. This was not done. We were expecting to see it here, but in the fall statement, it has been pushed forward, and there is no concrete targets. So once again, it's an objective that was not met. And above all, a fall statement presents the government's measures to deal with emergencies that have cropped up since the budget was presented. There have been many since the last budget. The economic situation has changed considerably. There are a lot of difficulties, and many people are being affected. And we had expected to see the minister today to respond to these major emergencies that have cropped up since the last budget. But unfortunately, this was not the case. And Mr. Speaker, we could even ask what this fall statement is for. I'll go back to it later, but many of the emergencies that we could have pointed to, they were not even mentioned in this budget or statement, economic statement. I'll give you another example. Chapter 1 about housing. Well, Mr. Speaker, there's a lack of housing, social housing, and we've learned for this year they're cutting $37 million. Next year, there's not 1 cent. In addition to what was already presented before, there's the GST cut for this construction of social housing, but you have to wait 2 years to see $54 million over several years to tackle housing. Is this enough? Especially when we know that most of these billions were already announced and haven't been spent yet. A few weeks ago, we had called on the minister to present our demands for the economic statement to respond to the current urgent situation that we're facing. For example, people who are homeless, Mr. Speaker. We know it's starting to get cold. The temperature is under 0, and some people are sleeping in tents in streets, and this is a catastrophic situation. We had asked, like Quebec did in its economic statement in the fall, to put emergency funds to tackle homelessness right away. And we have created an emergency fund to help municipalities to support people who are without lodging, so they have resources to do so. But there's nothing here. There's nothing in this fall economic statement. This was urgent, and the government and the minister is ignoring the real needs here. There's nothing about this. In terms of housing, I'll go back to that later in greater detail, but we had suggested the creation of an acquisition fund for nonprofits, so we could have either low interest rate loans or no interest loans for a social and affordable housing. We could have had a program that could have been easily implemented and set up quickly and not cost the government a fortune. But what we're doing here, the main measure that was announced, we're telling builders who want to develop a housing project, you have to get a loan from your financial institution until the building is built. You don't have to pay back the capital. It may seem strange, but it's not really something I heard from groups at the Finance Committee, for example. And at the end of the line, it won't really add any additional housing. For seniors. It's also really incredible with current inflation. The CPI, it was lower than what we've seen in recent months, but it's still above 3%. And low-income seniors in general, they're having a really hard time making ends meet. We need fairness. And the government decided to increase the OAS for those who are 75 years and older. And with my colleagues and the member for Shefford, who is the seniors critic, we have to make things fairer. We need an increase in OAS for people who are 65 years and older, because seniors are having a hard time making ends meet. They need support. What's being done is not enough. Since salaries are not annexed to inflation, as initially planned, and they could have used some support given the current high inflation. Another urgent issue is the reimbursement of the CEBA loans. Chambers of Commerce and many other organizations representing small businesses are sounding the alarm on this issue. They're asking for another year to be able to refund these loans. We know these loans were given during the pandemic, but when the pandemic ended, there was very strong inflation, and the economy was tough, and many small businesses had to continue increasing their debt loads. And what we're asking for, based on figures, roughly 1 out of every 5 businesses may declare bankruptcy if they don't extend the CEBA loan repayment deadline. The government's saying it'll cost too much, but they didn't do a serious study, because if you look at 1 of every 5 companies going bankrupt, it will be a cost not for the state alone, but for the entire economy. At the Bloc, we think it would be much more beneficial to extend the deadline by a year, and it would stimulate the economy, and it would avoid a high number of bankruptcies. A few weeks ago in the Journal de Montréal, Mr. Speaker, in my writing, they said that there is a high risk with the CEBA loans, because the minister is refusing to extend the refund of CEBA loans. And we tried to negotiate with the government, and we didn't get access to their studies because we don't think they did any. And in the end, the government decided to strike agreement with its natural ally, even though we could have reached agreement with them. The government decided to drop small businesses that are having a hard time right now, and we don't think they looked at our request seriously enough. Also, the economic statement should be responding to economic emergencies. For example, with media, local and regional papers, they're having a hard time and they're falling by the wayside one after the other. It's a catastrophic situation, and the situation is tough. We don't even know if these media companies will make it to Christmas or next year. That's how bad things are. And we've even seen layoffs that are coming with TVA. More than 500 employees are being let go. So even the biggest media player is having a hard time. And we were at least asking for an emergency fund, Mr. Speaker, at least for the next few months. And this wasn't done either. Also, to make things fairer, we wanted to end subsidies to the fossil fuel sector. We're talking about several $1 billion, and that wasn't done either. So this is very sad. Also, how much time do I have left? That's the number of minutes I have left? Okay, great. Thank you. Because I had a doubt. Another thing that was really important, this government has been promising overhaul of the employment insurance system, and a year and a half ago they said it was coming in springtime, and then they push it off to the fall, and now they're no longer talking about it and nothing has been done. And to be frank, I wanted to believe this Liberal promise, and I learned a lesson because they're not even talking about it. Shame on me for having believed that Liberal promise. And with respect to EI reform, there's also another particular issue. Once again, they need to respond to an urgent situation. There were forest fires everywhere, and many workers who are seasonal in the forestry industry weren't able to get in their hours to have access to EI because of these fires. We asked the minister about this topic. We said it's an urgent situation. We need to do something, think about them, but nothing was done. There's nothing in this economic statement to also deal with this issue. Often we rose in the House on this. I asked the minister, I said, you promised, and I see my colleague from BTBG, Bay James, who has discussed this file. They announced $1 billion for breakfasts at schools, and this money had been promised and announced, but we still haven't seen it implemented. And against the backdrop of growing inflation and children going to school with empty tummies, we could have seen this in the statement, but no, it wasn't urgent enough for the minister either.
Many of my colleagues talked about the needs for regional infrastructure, for agriculture, with the flooding in some regions over the summer. The produce sector is having a hard time. There's a great deal of difficulty. Could existing programs have been adapted? This would have been the time to do it in the fall economic statement. No, nothing was done. Nothing on agriculture, once again, in this economic statement. In a technical detail that affects many small companies in our regions, which could make a big difference. We know that the government has increased the excise tax on alcohol and wine in the face of Australian wine. There's a problem in the regulations on this. All alcohol is called wine in legal texts. We were able to take out cider and mead. That was a major gain, and producers are grateful for it. But then we realized that if the cider producer puts a little bit of pear cider in the drink, they have to pay 100% of the tax. Those who do maple alcohol have to pay the full tax. If there are any berries in those beverages, they have to pay 100% of the tax, whereas Australia and grape wine producers in Australia don't mind us helping our small producers. We've been calling on the minister to resolve this for 2 years. I know she's busy. There are many issues for her. But these are technicalities. Just follow up that would better recognize artisanal producers. It wouldn't take anything away from anyone. It wouldn't bother anyone in Australia. It would be easy to do, and this would have been the time to do it here. But no, that was not included either, once again. So it's really frustrating, really upsetting. So, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, the government, the minister, the fall economic statement was supposed to deal with urgent situations. I've raised a number of them that my colleagues advocate for. How many were addressed by the minister? How many of the urgent situations were addressed by the minister? 0. 0 like in Ouellette. I'm referring to a former minister. A minister under Prime Minister Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister, not an actuary. And the EI fund has doubled its surplus, and so workers are filling government coffers. Here I'm talking about the Department of Urban Affairs. What is that? Here, the government, in the statement, is creating a new department. My leader calls the Department of Interference, because it looks at housing and all of that, so really it's interference. With Pierre Trudeau, what he did, he created the Department of Urban Affairs, and the minister was Mr. Ouellette, and that's why I was mentioning him. And, Mr. Speaker, there's a research document from the Library of Parliament that says that, consequently, in March 1971, Prime Minister Trudeau named a Minister of State to Urban Affairs who was responsible for CMHC, but also for a new State Department, Urban Affairs, due to the constitutional limits that were unavoidable, trying to interfere in the province's affairs, this department was not responsible for any program. So the government is announcing the creation once again of this department. We can see what's coming. 2 paragraphs further, the document from the Library of Parliament says that there was a failure of interference by the Trudeau government in municipal affairs. And a little further on, given the lack of credibility of the department and the government's intention to restrict its spending, the Department of State was abolished in 1979. Is that what will happen with the creation of this department announced in the current fall economic statement? That's what we may expect. So I will look at a number of other elements from the economic statement. So yes, Mr. Speaker, it's incredible. We've seen in the House for a number of weeks disagreement between the Liberal government and the Conservatives. The Conservative government, rather the Conservative Party, has slogans. It's always saying slogans. It has one proposal on housing. What is it? To punish municipalities and provinces, saying you need to build 15% more housing, otherwise we'll cut funding for infrastructure. For example, in Quebec this year, housing starts were cut in half, so half of infrastructure funding would have been cut if that party were in power. So that's quite something. The Liberal government's response to that proposal is to take it up. In the economic statement, they said they'll do the same thing. They'll threaten the provinces and indirectly municipalities. If you don't build enough housing, we'll cut transfers. My goodness, Mr. Speaker. Does the Liberal government want to go back to the Stone Age too? I ask the question. There is a good measure for Airbnb. So reflecting municipal bylaws, it will be difficult to enforce, but there's hope there. I don't want to just criticize. That's a good measure. For the $15 billion in budgetary restrictions, that was supposed to happen in October, the government's plan, the Minister of the Treasury Board, it's not even in the November statement. And as I was saying, we raised a number of urgent matters. None is addressed here. There's no plan for urgent matters. They do not seem to understand what urgent means. Once again, they've ignored each of the demands of the Bloc, which were expressed by Quebecers. Clearly, this government, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, confuse budgetary discipline and inaction in the face of urgent situations. That will cost all of us more later. I'll remind you, Mr. Speaker, an economic update gives us an overview of the economic statement situation from the budget to now, dealing with urgent matters. But this economic statement does not go over changes and resolves nothing. This is a failed exercise. We wonder why this government went forward with this economic statement. Thanks to the Liberals, Mr. Speaker, things will get worse before they get better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, in looking over the fall economic statement, I think that there's things that are definitely worthy of noting. And for me personally, I look at it in terms of the issue of inflation. Canadians have been concerned about inflation. Even though inflation around the world is significantly higher here in Canada, this government has been focused on that. From a high back of just over 8% back in June of 2022 to today, where it was announced, I believe it's 3.1%. So it shows the government is serious about dealing with the issue of inflation. The members spent a great deal of time talking about housing. Within the fall statement, it reaffirms a solid commitment and new monies towards housing co-ops. We all talk about the importance of non-profit housing. Housing co-ops, Mr. Speaker, is an excellent way to support growing demands on the issue of housing. housing. It's affordable housing, Mr. Speaker. It's different than apartments. As a housing co-op, you are a resident, a co-owner, compared to an apartment. The apartments is also being beefed up in terms of purpose-built rentals.
I'm just, I know I'm getting all kinds of indications that people want to wrap it up, so there you go.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation affects everyone, especially those who are least well off, and it's very concerning. But when I look at what's in the economic statement, there's nothing to deal with inflation. Nothing to deal with inflation. The Honourable Member talked about housing. Yes, the government should do more for housing. What's it doing this year? It's cutting $37 million in housing on page 35 in the French. They're talking about the cooperative fund. He doesn't need to explain to any member of the Bloc what a housing co-op is. There are many in Quebec. We believe in that model. We're always telling the government to have more social housing, including cooperatives. This year, 2023, 2024, how much are they, much money putting towards that? Zero. 2024, 2025, how much for housing co-ops? Zero. It's urgent. It was urgent last summer, last spring. We need to take action now. Not just make commitments in principle for what will be done in 2, 4, 3, 5, 6, 7 years. The situation is urgent now. The government is really out of touch with the needs of people. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NDP shares the disappointment of my colleague regarding the Canada Emergency Business Account. That was our position, and we asked a number of times in letters and in conversation with the government to extend the deadline to repay the CIBA. And what confuses me is I don't understand how the federal government can have an expectation to receive more money by forcing companies that are not in a position to repay, to require them to repay now. We know that this will cause bankruptcies. Perhaps my colleague has thoughts on that. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague from the Finance Committee. We just spent the constituency week going through Western Canada, went to every region, and we heard people and all of the organizations, the chambers of commerce, SME representatives have said it needs to be pushed back by a year. That's what we've heard in Quebec. We've heard it everywhere. On an individual basis, when we speak to the minister, most agree with this. Most don't understand the reaction of the finance minister. That's where it's stuck. It's the Minister of Finance and senior officials who say it will be expensive. But the NDP and us here, we've said this for a long time because we want to be the voice of small businesses that we represent. But if I can add something, Mr. Speaker, we were ready to negotiate with the government. If you want to have C-56 adopted, push it back by a year. In all respect, we would have wanted the NDP to do that too. That to show that example so that in future negotiations, they could call for that in negotiations. There would be 20% fewer bankruptcies, we're told. It would make a big difference. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by thanking my Bloc colleagues for their voice in support of small businesses. It's so important that all members in this House speak for them, so thanks once again for that. My question is on the fact that this Parliament has adopted a benefit for people with a disability nearly 6 months ago, and once again, there's nothing in this fall economic statement for people with a disability who continue to live in poverty imposed by the law throughout our country, including in Quebec. Would the member for Joliette and the rest of the Bloc Québécois share my disappointment on this omission? The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his excellent question and his kind words. It's always a pleasure to see that we can collaborate together in this House. The goal of an economic statement is to address urgent situations. I congratulate the colleague for his French, and he's raised an urgent matter. That bill was passed 6 months ago. It needs to be implemented. Those who have a disability, well, in this inflationary context, they need that assistance. This was the time to do it. In the economic statement, this was the time to do it. But no, another urgent matter that was raised. The economic statement should be addressing urgent matters. This was the opportunity to address the situation. It's another missed opportunity. The government is out of touch with people and is not addressing urgent needs, as the colleague just gave us an example of. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many small businesses that have liquidity issues and difficulty repaying CEBA. What I've understood, the government wasn't able to target the additional amount that would be in the government's budget. So at the outset, and many of us believe that money to businesses that are struggling is an investment. So I'd like to hear my colleague talk to us about the calculations that seem to have been done or not done. So if people repay, if they have more time to repay, there would be fewer bankruptcies and there will be more money repaid. So it might not even be an expense. I'd like to hear my colleague on that. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my House Leader for raising that once again. These are basic economic questions. There are many economists in the Liberal Party, but this is nickel and diming people to try to save amount of the forgivable amount. This could cause many bankruptcies. It would have such a big impact that there's a risk to society and the government finances. It could cost more money to do this. Most ministers tell us that they agree with us, but it's the Minister of Finance who doesn't see it. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to underscore the work of the colleague from Terrebonne who sent a letter to the Minister of Finance to raise this with her, to tell her that the National Assembly in Quebec on September 26th, that was quite a long time before the November economic statement that the minister just put forward, the National Assembly unanimously called for a one-year reprieve. All of the politicians in Quebec called for this because they talk to people, they talk to small businesses, they meet with them, they're concerned about them, and like us, they can do the math. They can say the small amount of money we would save, we might lose a lot more later and destabilize the economy. So the fall economic statement was the time to announce this. It's another missed opportunity, another disappointment, another proof point that this government is very out of touch with people and small businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am pleased to rise and address the fall economic statement. We've certainly heard a lot of things in the chamber today, including some rhetorical flights of partisan fancy, the kind we've come to expect from the Conservative leader, with some very well-rehearsed chanting by the Conservatives at the end. But I'd like to be a little more serious than that in my remarks, because I recognize that Canadians are going through a very difficult time, and we've heard about it a lot. We've talked a lot about it in this chamber, and today was an opportunity for government to show that it's not out of touch and to show that it is prepared to move and to address the serious issues of our time with the sense of urgency that they deserve. And I don't want to, spoil anything for anyone, but I have to say it's a real disappointment. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways in which I think this is a very disappointing document. I'll also have occasion to mention some of the things that I think, government has talked about here that are not bad things, but I think the overriding theme has to be one of disappointment. What are the crises that we're facing? Well, we're certainly facing a global climate crisis. That much is very clear. Anyone who's been paying attention to the news, and unfortunately, you don't have to pay attention to the news if your house is on fire to know how severe climate change is getting and the important personal and economic consequences that it's having for Canadians, in addition to what it's doing to the environment. we're facing a housing crisis, and you don't have to go far. Again, you don't have to watch the news. You just have to walk out into your neighborhood. And odds are, no matter what neighborhood you live in, more and more neighborhoods are finding that they have people, friends and neighbors and family members who have lived in those neighborhoods their whole life, who can no longer afford to live in those neighborhoods and don't know where to go. So they're setting up camp in the park across the street because they don't know where else to go and they can't afford to put a roof over their head. These are the kinds of challenges that we're facing as a country. And it took a long time to get here. It took a long time to get here in respect to the climate crisis. I know my father mentioned the climate crisis in the parlance of the time in the early 1980s in this place. He did. And said that we needed to do things now. Can you imagine how cheap it would have been to address the climate crisis in the 1980s instead of waiting until now? I also know that the federal NDP caucus in the 90s, when the Liberals canceled the National Housing Strategy, were talking about the crisis that it would create in housing. So I can't, from where I sit, pretend in this place that these are new problems or that it was the Conservative leader who 2 years ago foresaw the housing crisis. The NDP saw this coming in the 90s. It's why we said we needed to continue to invest in co-op housing. It's why we said the federal government had to show up and continue building social housing. Right. And we've been sounding the alarm for over 30 years that Canada was going to find itself in this place. Why were we doing that? Because we knew you can't fix a housing crisis overnight. It's the kind of thing that you need continued, predictable investment year over year to continue to meet demand. And now that we've found ourselves here, in part because of the government that the Conservative leader was a part of, but as I say, not just that, the Liberal government in the 90s, and then the Harper government, and now this government who's had 8 years to address this problem, and it's only gotten worse under them. So these problems have been a long time in the making, and Canadians are beginning to really feel the hurt. What did we hear today from the finance minister? We heard from the finance minister that Canada has the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We heard from the finance minister that rating agencies are renewing Canada's AAA credit rating. We heard from the finance minister that Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. And what did we hear about their trumpeted new investment in housing? That it ain't coming till 2025. So how is it that Canada could be in the best fiscal position in the G7 and not afford to begin investing right now in the housing that we need for Canadians, for vulnerable Canadians, for sure, who don't have the means to pay rent in this economy, for working Canadians who don't have the means to pay rent or afford a mortgage in this economy, but also for the businesses that are telling us that the major barrier they face to growing their business is that they can't find a place to house their workers, that the people that they would like to have come work for them don't have a place to live and so can't come to the community where their business is. How is it that Canada, that we can have a deputy prime minister and a finance minister with the gall to get up and brag about Canada's fiscal position in comparison to everyone else in the world, and then say the cupboard is bare when it comes to addressing some of the most important crises of our time? Now, I'm quite familiar with the announcements that she made in respect of housing, the replenishment of the co-investment fund, because I've stood in this very place and called for that. And I've sat across the table from Liberals and demanded that they make investments in social housing. And I didn't demand that they made those investments in 2025. We demand that they make them right now. Likewise, with the replenishment of the RCFI, or the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, which is a mouthful, but really just means low interest loans for people who want to build housing, whether they're building market housing or nonprofit housing. And we expect in the future, and have been advocating, that post-secondary institutions, universities, colleges, should also be able to access that funding. That's right. That folks that want to build housing for seniors should be able to access that funding, that low interest financing should be made far more widely available so that it's not just a honeypot for developers, but it's a place for proven organizations across Canada, including nonprofit organizations, building housing for the vulnerable, have the opportunity to access that funding and ensure that there's going to be more housing, and housing on more accessible terms. So a huge disappointment that it didn't come now. I talked about what, not my words, what the finance minister and the deputy prime minister herself had to say, which was Canada's strong fiscal position. The question still is, well, how do you pay for it? How would you find the money? We already have a deficit, albeit the lowest deficit in the G7. Well, a 1-point increase in the corporate tax rate in Canada, which I would remind you, Mr. Speaker, in the year 2000 was 28% and is only 15% today, would generate over $3 billion a year. So to recapitalize the co-investment fund to the tune of $1 billion and not start that for 2 years, you could triple the recapitalization and do it every year in perpetuity. That's right. With a 1% increase. A 1% increase in the corporate tax rate. That's not a bad deal for corporations that say they can't find enough workers to keep making money because there's no housing. That's right. Exactly. Well, let's ask them to help build the housing that is going to help them grow their business and employ Canadians and make sure they have a roof over their head. That's a fair deal. What's not a fair deal is to have cut the corporate tax rate from 28% in the year 2000 to 15% today and not have Canadians be able to find a home. That's not fair. That's not good policy. So let's not pretend that Canada can't afford to move and move with urgency this year on significantly increasing the amount of social housing and affordable housing builds that the federal government is going to directly finance in whole or in part. It's simply not true, and it's irresponsible of the Liberals to cave to the demands of the Conservative Party and multinational corporations that don't care what happens to Canadians in terms of their housing, as long as they're able to pay bigger dividends to their shareholders and larger salaries to their CEOs. Exactly. That's the real coalition. That's in right. Parliament, Mr. Speaker. That's the real coalition, and it's been in power for far too long. How else could we pay for housing? Well, Mr. Speaker, we've heard reports this year of tens of billions of dollars that have been paid to consulting firms like KPMG and others. Well, why are we paying through the nose for high-priced consultants when we have one of the best civil services in the world that can do the work that we need them to do, instead of paying high-class consultants big profits in order to tell us how to cut taxes and put more people out of a home? That doesn't make a lot of sense. We saw the Liberals are quite prepared to spend money on scandals like ArriveCan. Why can't they spend it on housing instead? That's right. Exactly. That's right. Well, because their friends are already housed, Mr. Speaker, and they're looking to make a buck. But that's not a good excuse for Canadians that are living on the street and wondering when, not when Canada is going to do something unprecedented, not when Canada is going to do something new, but when Canada is going to start doing what it did for decades following the Second World War, simply do it again. I'll tell you, if Canadians in the 1950s could figure out how to build a home for everybody, surely in the 21st century, with all of the wealth and prosperity that Canada has enjoyed over the last 70 years, we can figure out to do it now and figure it out how to do it. Hear, hear. Now it's just the deficiencies of what they have announced. Never mind the fact that when you look to BC, there you have an NDP government that has taken upon themselves to start a nonprofit acquisition fund. Why do we need a nonprofit acquisition fund? Because in Canada today, for every 1 unit of affordable housing we're building, we're losing 15. Why are we losing those units, Mr. Speaker? Well, this comes back to the question that I had for the leader of the Conservative Party, which was why, when he was in cabinet, and in the time that he says he was Minister of Housing, the Harper government cut the operating grants to co-op housing and other nonprofit organizations that run housing that made rents affordable. Why did they do that? The reason that we've lost hundreds of thousands of affordable units over the last number of years is because they could no longer afford to operate with the subsidized rent that they used to operate with. Because the leader of the Conservative Party, when he sat at the cabinet table and when he was Minister of Housing, refused to renew the federal operating grants. And now what we have are companies that come in and buy those buildings because the current operators can't afford to operate them anymore, not with the tenants that are there. The corporate landlords don't mind. They kick out the tenants. They renovate the suites, they jack up the rent, and they invite Canadians with higher salaries to come in and rent those spaces. And so who's got the back of the people that can't afford to rent a luxury apartment in today's market? The NDP has their back, that's for sure. Absolutely. And what's becoming more and more apparent is that this government, after 8 years of trying, does not. That's right. It simply doesn't. Even if they had the good intention, which I think you could reasonably call into question, the competence clearly isn't there to deliver on a national housing strategy that can build enough units to ensure that this housing crisis doesn't stretch into my grandchildren's lifetime. And part of that is just a fascination and a fixation, and this is another thing that the coalition between Liberals and Conservatives share, with only market solutions. As I said, there was a time when the Canadian government built a lot of units, and it didn't build all the units. Canada's always had mostly a market for housing. But we used to build enough non-market housing that the people that couldn't afford to play in the market could still get a home. And they weren't sacrificing their food or their prescription drugs to try and get into the housing market that they couldn't really afford while paying for all the necessities of life. So the issue is that we're not doing that anymore, and we have to be doing that. And if it weren't for the actions of the leader of the Conservative Party and his government, or if this government had made good on their promise to renew the operating grants. But this is what I mean, Mr. Speaker, when I talk about the real coalition in the House of Commons. It's Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And so the one says, when they're not in power, oh, what you're doing is so bad, that's really terrible, we're gonna fix it when we get in. And then they get in, and lo and behold, they carry on. They carry on the policies of the previous government. And so Canadians never know how to get a break. Tommy Douglas used to tell the story of Mouseland, which put this point very well. And I encourage anyone watching, when they're done watching this speech, to look that up on YouTube or elsewhere. And it will pain you to see how relevant that very old story truly is. We also think that it's high time that real estate investment trusts stop getting the sweetheart tax deal that they've had since the 90s, because they've been part of the renoviction problem as well. And when the Liberals indicate notionally in this fall economic statement they're excited to get the Canadian Infrastructure Bank involved, all you can do is cringe. I mean, the Infrastructure Bank has hardly delivered a successful project, even where it's tried, like even within its mandate. It has struggled to deliver a project. Telling Canadians good news the Infrastructure Bank is getting involved is so out of touch. I don't even know where to begin. And it raises an important specter, which is that public infrastructure that's required in order to build more housing. So whether that's bigger sewer pipes or better wastewater management or all the things that you need in order to be able to support a number of units, it raises the specter that this government isn't interested in seeing municipalities own that infrastructure as they properly should, but are instead interested in using federal public dollars to finance the takeover of municipal infrastructure by private investors who are going to be interested in seeking a profit on that. And we know from many examples of P3s across the country that when you get the private sector involved in what should be public infrastructure, what happens is that you pay more and you get less. So that is by no means a hopeful thing for Canadians who want to see the kind of infrastructure development we need in order to expand our housing stock. And you know, when we talk about municipalities and housing, I think it's important. I was at breakfast with the Association of Manitoba Municipalities today. What are they talking about? They're talking about their very sincere and real desire to get more housing in their communities because it's a barrier to investment. They have businesses that want to invest, that want to build new facilities, but as I said earlier, can't do it because they know that there isn't enough housing for the workforce that they want for their business. Now, are these municipal politicians celebrating that? Are they shouting for joy and saying, yeah, that's great, we're keeping the investment out by not having enough housing? Absolutely not. And it's strange that one should have to say such a thing. But with the leader of the Conservative Party spending so much time in here pretending like municipal politicians don't care to be able to get more housing in their community or aren't interested in attracting that investment to their community, I think it's high time somebody set the record straight. And I can tell you that a community that's already so cash-strapped that they can't build enough housing to bring in the kind of investment that they want to see their local economy prosper, slashing their resources is not going to help them build more units the next year. It's only going to compound the problem. It's got to be one of the dumbest ideas on offer in Canadian politics today. But when we talk about investment and we talk about Canadian businesses, there's a whole bunch of businesses that started up when the Canada Green Homes Initiative got started because they wanted to become the folks that do the evaluation of how well insulated a house is, or they wanted to be the person that came in and installed a heat pump, or they wanted to be the person that helped Canadians save on their energy bills and reduce their emissions. And what we don't see in here is a commitment to renew that program. What we do here outside this place are a lot of businesses that are concerned because they thought the Liberal government had a long-term commitment to reducing emissions. They thought it wasn't a gimmick. And they should be forgiven for thinking that. And it's not too late for the Liberals to do the right thing and to come out and to commit to renewing this program, both so that Canadians can continue to have access to the funds they need to renovate their home, reduce our emissions, and save money on their heating bill, but also to save the businesses that have invested in good faith in the skills and the equipment that they need in order to be the people to drive that forward. What else could we do for businesses that isn't done in this fall economic statement? Well, an extension of the Canada Emergency Business Account, the CEBA loans, for the repayable period would make a huge difference not only to those businesses that are in serious distress and are deserving of having that credit extended, but also to the government, who presumably would like to be paid again. And I don't know how a government could think that forcing businesses into bankruptcy that they have loans with is a way to get the money back. Who benefits? Who benefits? Workers lose their jobs, owners lose their business, government doesn't get the money. This is a win situation for nobody. And it is confounding that the government hasn't put that together. I think they owe us all a much better explanation. And of course, when those workers are put out of a job, what are they going to need? Employment insurance. And where is the government on employment insurance? Well, they're adopting another boutique change to the program that is good for the people that it affects. And I am glad to see New Democrats have supported an adoption benefit under the EI program, but what we want is an adoption benefit under a new modernized EI program, the kind that the Liberals have been promising for over 8 years now, so that the whole program serves workers better instead of just adding more things on to a system the Liberals themselves admit is broken. It doesn't make sense. That's right. And of course, better than employment insurance is a job, and we've supported investments in battery manufacturing plants across the country, but now we hear that those jobs may not be for people already in Canada after all. And that's a serious problem because it speaks to the government not having done its due diligence with these companies in ensuring that they're going to be hiring Canadians who are looking for work in order to do these jobs. And I think it also bears mentioning that a lot of those workers aren't necessarily coming through the TFW program. They're coming under the auspices of labor mobility sections in trade agreements negotiated by Liberal and Conservatives alike. In this case, the South Korean trade agreement that was negotiated while the Harper government was in power and the leader of the opposition was at the cabinet table. Shame. And when we're talking about emergencies, just a last bit, I want to talk about the Canada Disability Benefit, because there are no folks in Canada who are more hard hit by the current economic circumstances than Canadians living with disabilities who were promised a new benefit and the government has not been delivering. So exactly. I know I'm out of time, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to the question and answer.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as you may know, I've been a parliamentarian for many.
Oh, I'm going to cut headset. Voila. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. I even heard it feedback there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies to those interpreters. Mr. Speaker, I've been a parliamentarian for a good number of years, and during the early 90s, I was in fact the housing critic in the province of Manitoba. At that point in time, the coalition was the NDP, Liberals, and the Progressive Conservatives that all said that the federal government had no role in housing, Mr. Speaker. And it was a sad time. It was a time in which I debated in Winnipeg North, in the riding of Winnipeg North, against the NDP, saying that yes, they should have a role to play. So when the member talks about the lack of interest in housing, I can assure him that there has been no government more than this government in the last 5 years that has invested more money in housing in the last 50, 60 years plus. Within this fall economic statement, there is a tangible commitment, for example, for non-profit housing, including housing co-ops. Would the member not acknowledge the fact that there is substantial money going towards Canada's non-profit housing co-ops in the fall statement?
I know everybody's trying to answer it, but I'll go to the Honourable Member for Elmwood-Transcona.
I've been trying to figure out how it is that the Liberal government is so ineffective at delivering new housing, and I think it may be that they're spending all their time thinking about Manitoba provincial politics in the early 90s. I don't know. I was 7 or 8 at the time. But I would encourage them to pay attention to the economy today. Please. And yes, there's been a lot of fanfare and announcements, but I would say to the member for Winnipeg North, when you start looking at the details of the program, like for instance, the announcement today that they'll be out trumpeting, look at the details, look at the table, because the table very clearly says that money ain't coming for another 2 years. It should be now, and there should be more of it.
That's right.
It is true.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments?
And comments? L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech, but we have realized today is not, the word urgency doesn't seem to be the word of the day. I was in Sherbrooke where people were asking the government to take action, but there was nothing. It's urgent to act on homelessness. And there was a forum on social housing, and they needed solutions, and the government has to do its part in terms of its jurisdiction. There's also the question of the CEBA loans. The Chamber of Commerce wanted to have help for small business to help them to get through the next few months without declaring bankruptcies. It's also urgent to take action to help seniors. They voted for my bill to help fixed income seniors who are particularly affected. They need help so that all seniors above 65 years old will have OAS increases. Well, where are these measures in the update? The Honourable Member for Elmwood-Transcona. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her bill, her private member's bill, that I was very happy to support. And I think it's rather clear there are many things that the NDP wants to see the federal government do that the Liberals are not ready to do. So yes, there are things that we've been asking, some things they're not ready to do, and there are some aspects of negotiations to find a way so we can deliver for Canadians, even despite the fact that the Liberals are not ready to do many things that they should do. So if the Bloc wants to try to negotiate, it's always up to them to do so. I'm very proud of the fact that even if we can't get everything we want, we can still deliver results for Canadians in our negotiations. Thank you. Questions and comments?
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, the member from Elmwood-Transcona, for his excellent analysis of the fall economic statement. For the Liberals, I want to be very clear to say, I want to turn their minds to page 31 of the fall economic statement. Guess what? More financing for apartment construction, 2023, 2024, 24, 25, zero. on both of those columns. Building more affordable housing, 0 on both those columns.
Shame.
And then you turn to the co-op housing piece. Strengthening the cooperative housing development program, 0 on both of those columns. And you know what the big joke is? They actually announced $309 million for co-ops. That was a promise back in 2022, to which they have slow walked and have not delivered. They are now announcing it as though it's new money, and that won't even roll out until 2024. So my question to my colleague is this. The other thing that's missing here is, why is it that the government not stopping corporate landlords from rental evicting people by saying no to them in buying up low-cost housing and displacing people?
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
I want to thank the member for Vancouver East for her question. I also want to thank her for all the excellent work that she does on the housing file. And of course, there's just no way that Canada can meet the deficit that we have of affordable and social housing if we're going to lose 15 for every one that we build. And that's why it's imperative that the government does find a way to stop big corporations from acquiring buildings and kicking out the tenants. They could do it by having a moratorium. The way they should have done it 8 years ago was by renewing the operating grants, because it's the fact that those operating grants were allowed to expire that has put so many affordable units back on the market. They promised to undo that measure of the Harper government, and then they completely failed Canadians, and we've seen hundreds of thousands of units pass from the hands of nonprofit and co-op operators who were offering affordable rents to the hands of giant corporate landlords who are more interested in paying big dividends to their shareholders. And we can't continue like this. It's why we're seeing so many people on the street in all of our communities across the country, and it has to stop, or the problem is going to continue to get worse, and the tent cities are going to continue to grow. The Conservative leader likes to talk about tent cities, but he doesn't like to talk about the things you have to do in order to properly close them and make sure the people there have a place to go. Exactly. It's the policies of the government he was a part of that built those cities. And it's going to take an NDP government to take them down in the right way.
In comments, question et commentaire, the honourable member Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I really wanted to recognize as well that there was no spending in this housing budget here for the next 2 years in those particular areas. But I'm very concerned about the fact that this.
When everybody can get an opportunity to ask a question, I'm sure we'll all stand up and ask questions. The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very concerned about the fact that in this Liberal fall economic statement, they're talking about the fact that their health care next year will be exceeded by the debt payments that will be made by this government. It'll cost more to pay the debt down than it will for the health care that they're putting forward, at the same time as they're increasing the revenues from employment insurance by about 30%. And I just wonder if my colleague would have anything to say about that, and particularly in the concern about health care.
Honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
I think there's absolutely no question that the federal government has an even bigger role to play when it comes to funding healthcare, and one of the best ways that they could do that would be to establish a national pharmacare program, because what it would do is reduce the amount that Canadians are already spending on prescription drugs. And we know Conservatives in other types of debates like to remind us there's only one taxpayer. Well, there's only one taxpayer when it comes to pharmacare too. And the fact is that those taxpayers are paying a lot more for having 10 individual provincial pharmacare plans or having to pay premiums into a workplace plan. They're paying a lot more for prescription drugs than they would under one national pharmacare plan. So the single best thing that the government could do to increase health services and save Canadians money at the same time would be to institute a national, universal, single-payer pharmacare system. It's why we're holding their feet to the fire on that and expect them to deliver.
Questions and comments? For a quick one, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Start by saying I appreciate the words from the member for Elmwood-Transcona when it comes to calling out the extent of the disappointment time and again on housing, and we saw it again this afternoon. And credit to the NDP on Bill C-56. They were able to negotiate a fix to ensure that co-ops would have access to that really important measure. But it does beg the question, When we see this happen time and time again, I'd love to hear from my colleague from Elmwood Transcona, at what point enough is enough? At what point do we say the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and we've got to make sure that more gets done on housing and so many other of the challenges our country faces, and that we've got to make sure this government does better and more?
We are out of time, but I will allow the honourable member for Elmwood Transcona to respond.
Well, I would say this. Canada's been kicking the can down the road when it comes to addressing the need for social affordable housing and more market housing for far too long. We shouldn't be kicking the can down the road any further. We're going to, but what we don't want is to trade a Liberal government for a Conservative government and then a Conservative government for a Liberal government, because that has been the problem and it's how we got to here. We're going to take the time we need to talk to Canadians and let them know that there's an option for a real NDP government that's going to do what it takes to build the housing Canadians need.
Reprise du débat, continuing debate. The honourable member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleagues here in the chamber after this important fall economic statement. Unlike many of my colleagues in the opposition, particularly the member for Elmwood Transcona, we're disappointed because the opportunity to do important and urgent things right now has been ignored and forgotten. Why? I don't know. Because, like other members in this place have already said, we have the ability, we have the fiscal position that makes us able to have viable opportunities, but nothing.
All economic statement on the urgent crises facing Canadians, on health care, on housing, affordability, especially also the multiple ways in which the climate crisis is costing us. It is referenced in the fall economic statement that one reason food prices have gone up is multiple climate events that have caused crop failures, that caused prices to go up. Putin's invasion of Ukraine obviously has caused energy prices to go up, but one of the key reasons that food prices have gone up is that climate events around the world are causing bread baskets to produce less. Places that produced a lot of food are producing less. There are ways we could have used this moment of fiscal restraint to improve our climate record. This may be the last chance I have, Mr. Speaker, to speak at any length about the climate situation before I'm no longer able to speak in this place, not because of a health issue, but because we don't allow Zoom from foreign countries. And, Mr. Speaker, I can't participate virtually from COP28 in Dubai. But this is a moment when the government of Canada should really be looking itself in the mirror and saying, okay, there's a reason that of all the countries on Earth, I mean, usually we stop with the G7, because Canada has the worst climate record of any country in the G7. But right now, the United Nations just released a report on the eve of COP28, which will take place in Dubai from November 30th to December 12th. It usually runs late. We'll figure 13th. But, Mr. Speaker, the United Nations just assessed the climate records and performances of every country on Earth and the gap between rhetoric and action. Every country on Earth, not just the G7, and Canada's maintaining our horrific record of being the worst. So on the gap, the United Nations Environment Program Emission Gap Report, Canada has a 27% gap between promises and reality. Next worst is the United States with a 19% gap, then South Korea with an 18% gap, UK, 11% gap. All the countries of the developing world, known in UN parlance as the G20, have a 4% gap. What do these gaps amount to? Well, the Paris commitments that we took in 2015, which are legally binding commitments, were not to any particular target of X% reductions against X year, because the incoming Liberals in 2015 kept in place the Harper target from May of 2015, a weak target. They kept it in place and then replaced it not until 2020, 5 years of keeping the same target. And then actually they didn't replace it till 2022. So 7 years of the same weak target. But they weren't close to hitting the weak target of the previous Conservative government. We often say in this place, Mr. Speaker, that Canada's never hit a single target it's put forward on climate. But may I be more specific? We've never gotten the direction right. Right? It's as if when we say we missed the target, it's like we were sort of maybe on a dartboard with your typical bullseye effort. Just, oh darn, we were close. If we were firing darts at a bull, the bartender better duck, because we've never gotten the direction right, okay? Never gotten the direction right. So when we promise that our emissions will go down, they go up. Now, what we're shooting for in the Paris Agreement is hanging on to global civilization. The opportunity that we had in the 80s and the 90s, and my colleague from Elmwood, Transcona, talked about when his dad was in this place. The very Honorable Bill Blaikie, who was environment critic for the NDP in the 1980s when I first knew him, talked about global warming and what we had to do to avoid losing our glaciers, warming temperatures around the world. We had the chance to avoid all those things. We no longer have the chance to say that we can avoid the climate crisis, where our addiction to fossil fuels, our greed, greed is what's driving big oil in saying, yeah, we know the science, but we don't want to talk about it because all we care about is delivering profit to shareholders. By the way, that isn't good law. In Canada, the law requires that corporations think of other things, that the directors of corporations consider all stakeholders, and by the way, future generations should count for something. But we have, in the last number of decades, lost the opportunities we once had to avoid climate change and global warming altogether. And because of greed and addiction to fossil fuels and a commitment to developing and continuing to shovel money to the wealthiest in the world, the billionaire class has a priority that one doesn't understand compared to our own children and grandchildren. But right now we had an opportunity to pay attention to this report from the United Nations on the eve of COP28 and reflect any of that urgency in this economic statement. We lost that chance too. It makes one not, I don't know, I'm always torn, Mr. Speaker, between anger and grief. How do I talk to my kids about this anymore? How many of our kids don't want to have kids because of what they see in this world? But that opportunity also was there for the Minister of Finance to cut costs. So on doit utiliser les...
We have to use... we have to reduce costs and save billions of dollars, and not just share funds for fossil fuel companies. This was a fall economic statement. We need responsible budgetary management, responsible, and at the same time they continue to give money and subsidies, billions, to fossil fuels. Why not cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline? We're talking about billions of dollars, 31 billion. What about the rights of Indigenous peoples and the future of our children and our grandchildren?
Have more money for the things the government says it cares about. Affordable housing, reducing the costs for Canadians, and cutting the costs of forest fires from one side of the country to the other. I noted in here, there's a reference in the fall economic statement on page 6 that says, well, looking at what's happened to global economic activity and the contracting of the Canadian economy, and they say, quote, while part of this decline was tied to temporary factors, including a record-breaking wildfire season.
Temporary.
I don't think that's so temporary. We haven't hit a new normal. Some people are tempted to use that language, new normal. No. We're experiencing precursors of what only gets worse. Because our commitment, I started to talk about our commitment to the Paris Agreement for all countries all over the earth was to avoid going above 2 degrees Celsius global average temperature increase and to try to hold to 1.5 degrees. This latest report from the United Nations says we're on track to over 3 degrees. These are not political commitments. These are moral commitments based on the science that says if we don't act now, the window closes on our kids having a livable world. And we can't continue to say, as many colleagues in this place, and certainly I hear it from people a lot, the fear of what the Conservatives would do after the next election is so extreme that people are prepared to ignore that the people who are responsible for condemning our kids to an unlivable world sit on this side of the House in the Liberal caucus. We can't ignore the reality that on their watch, the people who claim to be climate leaders, and the only thing that makes the Liberals look good, they should be thanking the Conservatives, because if it wasn't for every time that the Conservative Party stood up and said, we don't want any carbon pricing, and without putting in place, you can make a better argument. You can do other things other than carbon pricing to reduce emissions. As I said, you can start canceling billions of dollars to fossil fuel companies. You could put in place what the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre has put forward in Motion 92, an excess profits tax on the obscene profits and war profiteering of big oil. You could do that. But, Mr. Speaker, you can't continue to ignore it. The Conservatives, and I know there's many Conservative members of Parliament who care about the climate crisis and their own kids and want to be able to stand up and talk about that, but it's not the current brand. The NDP members, I know there's many who would also want to say cancel the TMX pipeline, but then they get in trouble with Rachel Notley. So this is an insanity that we're in right now. The fall economic statement, let me in with what time I have left, Mr. Speaker, I want to at least say that there's some things in here that are good, and it's about time. I'm grateful that at least there's finally cracking down on Airbnbs and the profiteering on short-term rentals that takes affordable housing out of our markets. I'm glad to finally see, I can't believe it's taken so long, to take the GST and the HST off mental health services, particularly for therapists, for going to talk, for a psychotherapist, to counselors, to take GST and HST off that. Astonishingly, that's it for measures for public health in this fall economic statement. Again, the Green Party has consistently, in every platform for how many elections, called for a national pharmacare plan. National pharmacare, not filling the gaps for people who don't have access to drugs, but a national pharmacare plan. We're the only country in the world with universal health care where covering of pharmaceutical drugs is not automatically included. And if we did that, we know from whether the Hoskins study or the report that came out of a number of major universities called Pharmacare 2020, we know that would save us billions of dollars a year in the healthcare system. That's not mentioned either. But when we look at what's here, there are many good words about caring about affordable housing, caring about cooperatives, co-op housing as a way of going forward. But we have tent cities springing up all over the place in this country. And I think, and Greens believe, it takes the kind of concerted effort that takes place after a major disaster when people are living rough. What do you do? What did we do as a country? Can we remember? It was a long time ago when the Halifax explosion occurred. I know the honourable member will remember the stories of that time. Obviously, he was not there then, but that Halifax explosion, within months, the government of Canada and the government of Nova Scotia built housing for thousands of people because it was an emergency. Now is an emergency, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that we will see better, because the Minister of Finance ended her speech. Better is always possible. Better is possible, but not very likely unless we raise holy hell about the crises we face. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question the honourable member for Milton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's the first time that I get the chance to say welcome back to my friend and colleague in the House. It's good to see you happy and healthy and standing in the House of Commons. This House of Commons is so much better with the member from Saanich Gulf Islands here. I have to say that. It's great to be in a conversation where we talk about how we fight climate change, not whether we fight climate change. And I know that we can always count on the member from Saanich Gulf Islands for that insight, perspective, and strong advocacy. I'm glad that the member spoke about co-op housing. I'm never shy about the fact that I'm a proud co-op kid. My family grew up at Chautauqua Co-op, and my mom still lives there. My mom also runs co-ops and has been building co-ops, and she texted me today after some remarks yesterday in the House of Commons to say, keep talking about co-ops, because we need to keep investing in co-ops. And I was so thrilled to see an additional $309 million for cooperative housing. This is a non-market solution to a market-based problem, Mr. Speaker, and it's so critical that we invest where we can and we build long-term affordability into the housing system, and I'm thrilled that there's additional money in there. And with respect to affordability, Mr. Speaker, we know that climate change presents an existential threat, not just to our species, but also to affordability. The number one reason why food costs are up is because of climate change. So I'm glad to see the member from Saanich Gulf Islands back and healthy in this place. I thank her for advocacy, and I thank her for her speech tonight. And if she wants to share any insights on co-ops in Saanich Gulf Islands or anywhere in Victoria, I'm happy to listen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, and thanks to my honourable colleague from Milton. It's also, I appreciate his kind words. At the time I had a stroke, and now there are a number of members in this place, I mean so many, who sent me nice notes and prayed, and I appreciate that a lot. But look, on co-ops, we had a commitment to $1.5 billion in budget 2023, and that money hasn't started to be spent yet, if I get that right. So we do have new money announced in the fall economic statement. But why have we not taken things faster and moved? I mean, the model of co-op housing is a perfect model. CMHC used to build a lot of co-op housing. Why are we not building the co-op housing as fast as we possibly can? Why are we still allowing real estate investment trusts to keep housing as a place for speculators to make money? We've got to have homes where there's no where we, as much as possible, are making sure that people aren't investing in a speculative way, so that home for people to live is used as a mechanism for corporations to increase their profits. If we could just, I don't know where I'm going with this, Mr. Speaker, but sometimes I think if we could just deal with the word greed and change one letter, get rid of the D and add an N. We need to have policies that are designed for people who care about each other more than they care about the expanding wealth of the top 1% or 0.01% whose wealth keeps growing, while the bottom and the lowest income people struggle to. I was so disappointed that this budget this fall economic statement doesn't provide school lunch programs or school breakfast programs. The people in low-income communities need to know that if their kid goes to school hungry, somebody will give them something to eat before they start trying to learn.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome the member for Spanish Gulf Islands back. I'm pleased to see her here in health. My question for her, Mr. Speaker, is with this economic statement, we see that the government, the Liberal government, is going towards the center and is taking some measures that were put forward by the Conservative Party. So the Liberal Party is forgetting something very important, equality for all, and the environment, which affects each and every one of us in an equal way. The impacts of climate change were felt everywhere, and especially in Quebec with forest fires over the summer. So I'd really like to hear my colleague tell us if she could have chosen one issue. She mentioned a number of them, but one issue that she would have liked to see in the economic statement that would happen soon, that could have been included in the economic statement, what would have been the issue she would have chosen? The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands. Thank you to my colleague, the member for Terrebonne. There are a number of issues, but if I were to choose just one, well, I'm stunned that in this economic statement, the fall economic statement, there is no reference to the need to, well, I know the name in English.
Homes program. Le programme.
The Greener Homes program. So to increase energy efficiency in each home with the participation of each homeowner. It's bizarre to me that there's no funding for that. With the recent announcements for the carbon price and the cost of heating a home, it was clear that we really need this program. But now, the funds are almost all already spent. The bank is empty. We need a program for each homeowner to make their houses greener with energy efficiency. And it's not in this fall economic statement.
Question and commentaire.
Questions and comments?
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The story of Northern Ontario is we gave away the gold, we gave away the timber, we gave away the hydro, but the greatest resource we gave away year after year was the talent of our young people. That's why the investment in education was so fundamental. And so when we saw the destruction of Laurentian University through the exploitation of the CCAA, the destruction of the Franco-Ontarian programs, the destruction of Indigenous programs, the destruction of the midwifery program for Northern women, New Democrats said we had to deal with this. We called for an emergency debate in the House. New Democrats brought forward legislation to call to close the loopholes and protect public institutions. We see finally that the Liberals are recognizing that there is a problem with the exploitation of the CCAA against post-secondary institutions. They haven't included in their fall economic statement, though, the need to protect all public institutions so that we don't have Danielle Smith or Premier Moe or Doug Ford putting hospitals and other institutions under CCAA to strip them and destroy them and take them apart. So I want to ask if my colleague is willing to work with the New Democrats. We are going to fight to ensure that what happened at Laurentian University is never, ever done again to a public university, to any kind of public institution, that public investment will remain and opportunities will remain in this age of privatization and corporate backroom deals.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, the Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay. I would be honored and the Greens commit here and now to work with the NDP to make sure that public institutions like Laurentian University never face the threats of insolvency and bankruptcy and the scandalously bad management that left students high and dry. I remember that debate. I remember so well what was done to help. And finally, we see something in this fall economic statement to end that kind of practice, predatory bankruptcies. Let's keep working to keep what's public, and let's take out the language of common sense is a good thing. It sounds great. Let's return to common decency.
In comments, real quick on the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One element of our colleague's speech that I really appreciated is the framing that this is not as simple as what we choose to spend or not in. It's also about what we should be cutting. Subsidies to oil and gas, for example, to the tune of $22 billion. What could we invest in if we weren't wasting funds there? What I'd like to hear more from her on is the calls tonight to ensure we end legislated poverty for people with disabilities. And this government has promised many times over, but has yet to show any commitment in terms of dollars for the Canada Disability Benefit. Can she share her reflections on that? Here.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands in 45 seconds.
45 seconds. First of all, I thank my colleague from Kitchener Centre, and I want to also pay tribute to him for his consistent hard work to make the disability benefit real, working tirelessly to get the Liberal government to keep its promise in this area. I mean, we also had a promise from them in, I can't remember how many campaigns, I think starting in 2015, the Liberal platform said they were going to get rid of subsidies to fossil fuels, and have expanded a number of them. They've promised to deliver this benefit to people who are disproportionately living in poverty or people living with disabilities. It's time to get that disability benefit. It's time to see it. I can't believe it's not in the fall economic statement, quite honestly, Mr. Speaker. Let's see it ASAP. Let's get it delivered to the people who need it most.
I want to thank everyone for their interventions this evening.
It being 6:34 p.m., pursuant to order made on Thursday, November 9th, 2023, the House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 2 p.m., pursuant to Standing Order 24-1.